Welcome to another episode of Orthodox Family Life. You, your mother, and your grandmother were likely all heavily influenced by feminism. This ideology has been the main driver of how the modern woman sees herself and the world around her. Feminism has been in charge for so long that many young girls today don't know any woman who does not live by its tenets. But the tide is turning, and lots of young women are rejecting feminism and trying to embrace a more traditional lifestyle. Rejecting feminism may actually be the easier part, because how does one begin to embrace traditional womanhood when they've never seen it? So here are 7 tips to help you move towards living as a more traditional woman. Number 1, stop consuming modern messages. You will become like the people you spend the most time with. If you watch TikTok all day and Netflix all night, you will be formed into a modern woman. Whether it's movies, TV shows, music, or social media, we are swimming in negative messages about how to be a woman. We see a lot of extreme independence where a woman feels like she doesn't need anybody and she can do all things on her own, to messages about sexual freedom, which is actually sexual slavery and tyranny. And women are taught that the most that they can have in this world is great power and to be admired by all. All of these messages are corrupt and they are lies. And so the first step in moving towards a more traditional life is to reject these messages. Number 2, nourish yourself with examples of the type of woman you aspire to be. Now again, we just mentioned that you know how to be a modern woman by watching TV and being on social media and spending time with other modern women. So to learn how to be a traditional, pious woman, you have to read about them. You have to spend time with them. Now here I do want to make a slight distinction. I'm often using the word traditional, but really I mean traditional and pious. If we look back to maybe the traditional wife of the 1950s, we can find a lot of things that we could criticize. So we're talking about a traditional life in terms of what women have done for hundreds and thousands of years in the context of the Orthodox faith, which is leading pious lives. And so to be a pious traditional woman, first of all, we need to spend time with them. And of course, our most holy and pious example of a woman is the Mother of God. In her, we see all the virtues. She is, of course, the greatest saint our church has. And she is the image of not just what a woman should be, but what any Christian should be. She is full of virtue, and her life is centered on Christ. So, of course, we should all be praying to the Mother of God every day and asking her help in all things. But we can learn more about her by studying her life through all the different feast days. Her nativity, her conception, her entrance into the temple, the nativity of our Lord, and then all the times that we see our Theotokos by the Lord's side, whether it's at the wedding at Cana or at the foot of the cross. We can learn so much from our Panagia, and most importantly, we can pray to her. It is the custom of many pious Orthodox Christians to read the paracleses to her every day. Now, next to our Panagia, we also have wonderful women saints that we can get to know. It's imperative that you read about the holy women that have come before us through all the different ages and all the different cultures. You can see queens and princesses, beggars, mothers, monastics. You can see people from all over the world, including America, with our newest saint, Matushka Olga from Alaska. And all of these women show us in the details of their life how to be a woman in that situation, how to be a holy woman in that situation. But when you read many of these lives, you begin to see that there's a great continuity between them all. Their love of God, their love of others, their humility. And so it's important that we replace all of the messages we're getting from media with the truth. And the truth lies in the lives of these holy women. Now, of course, we also need the influence of holy people that are still living in the world that we live in modern-day America. And this can be done by making friends with female monastics. If you haven't already been to a monastery, I highly suggest you go and begin to develop a relationship with the sisters and especially with the abbess of the monastery. You can learn so much by watching them and their piety and how they embody all the virtues, again, of humility, of modesty, of lack of judgment of others, their hard work, and the many different handiworks that they take on. When you go to a monastery, you'll be amazed to see that the sisters often sew and bake and cook and have gardens and orchards and animals. They paint icons and they make candles. They make crafts for the bookstore. They translate different holy books to be sold. Their life is so rich, and there's so much that we can learn in just the things that we can do at home that are holy and good things that keep us, I don't want to say just keep us occupied, but that teach us how to work and teach us how to care for others and how to add value to the world. You'll notice they often also quietly take care of others, elderly people in the neighborhood or people who just need a little extra help or the sick or the suffering. They're always there. And again, this is a model for us as women. Next, I would suggest that you develop friendships with the women in your parish. Sit with the older, pious ladies at coffee hour. Listen to them. Ask them questions. Try to connect with them. If you find someone that you particularly connect with, maybe you can ask if there's something you can do to help them. Maybe they need some help with chores around their house, or maybe they no longer drive and need a ride to church or to the store. By spending time with them, you're going to get an idea for, again, the older values, the values that we've lost. And of course, there's many wonderful classical novels that you can read that give you some insight into the lives of women from long ago. Two of my favorites are Jane Eyre and Persuasion. Now, a lot of young women these days have read 50 Shades of Grey. And again, I want to go back to when you put that kind of thing in your mind and in your heart, you're going to be changed in a negative way. But if you pour into your soul good books like Jane Eyre and Persuasion that show a woman living virtuously and choosing piety and struggling to make the right choices in her life, often when it's painful or confusing, this will really strengthen you as a woman. The point here is that you have to re-educate yourself with what it means to be a healthy, traditional, pious woman. And we do that through reaching out to the saints, praying to them, reading their lives, especially Apologia, by forming relationships with women in our lives, whether that's monastics or the older pious women in our church. And finally, by even using our recreation time to read good books that encourage us in this journey towards being a more pious and traditional woman. Let's move on to number 3, which is pay attention to how you treat others. It seems today that women are, for some reason, given a pass on how they treat other people and are never really held to account for what they say and do. So just a few things about how we treat other people. I think we should always be open to listening to people, not assuming that our opinion is right or that our opinion and our way of doing things is the only thing that matters. We should try to cultivate respect for other people, especially for people in authority. We should run from gossiping and criticizing other people. One of the biggest things I see in modern women is that they seem to love to expose the sins of other women in particular. And I don't know if this is a way of tearing down other women so that they feel like they are lifted up. But it's quite diabolical. And I'd say we really need to struggle towards covering the sins of other people. And what I mean by this is if you see someone who does something wrong, you don't necessarily need to call them out, especially in front of other people. You don't need to complain or slander them, gossip about them. But you could make excuses for them. Oh, God bless them. They must be having a really hard time. Or if someone tries to engage in gossip with you, you can say, yeah, I don't know about that, and just leave it at that. But a true woman, a woman that's holy, she covers the sins of other people. She never engages in tearing people down, because women are ultimately builders of culture and builders of the family and of love and of society. And so this particular point is so important for women to learn, that you want to build up everybody around you, your children, your husband. It's a great tragedy when I hear a woman tearing her own husband down, especially in front of other people. You can have arguments with your husband, you can have disagreements, of course, but that should always be done in private, not in front of your children, not in front of other people. And to everybody, you should always say, I love my husband. He's such a hard worker. He's helped me so much. And so again, listening to others, showing respect to everyone, especially people in authority, and really struggling against gossip and tearing people down with our words. Okay, number 4. We need to embrace the truth that all people have known. Men and women are different. What it takes to be a good man is different than what it takes to be a good woman. Now, feminism unfortunately teaches that the only paradigm that has value is the male paradigm. To be strong and to be working out of the house, to be ambitious, right? And it tells us that the only way a woman can be successful is to take on the jobs and the attributes of men, to compete with men. If she chooses to stay home with her own children, she has wasted her life. Women who get high-powered jobs, make a lot of money, and display traditionally male personality traits are often the women that other women esteem. But is mothering a waste of time? There were many times in the last 25 years that I could tell that people were looking down on me for just being a mom. But why should I feel ashamed for doing the greatest and loftiest job in the world? I truly cannot think of another job with more honor, except maybe the priesthood. My husband is an engineer, and I've always been proud of him and respect his labor for our family. It has allowed me to stay home after all. However, my job as a mother has more eternal value than his. It just does. I nourish the souls and bodies of our children every day. He designs parking lots. But why in the world would anyone rate that job, a good and honorable job, over mothering? My husband is a good man because he endures the drudgery of everyday work at a thankless job so that our family can have what we need. And I strive to be a good wife by honoring and respecting his sacrifice by caring for his children. Number 5, embracing modesty. Now, modesty is often talked about in terms of what we wear, and that is a good place to start. But modesty is so much more than just what we wear. It's how we talk to others and how we live our life. But let's begin with the way that we dress. In Orthodoxy, we believe that there is a connection between what we do and our spiritual life. Fasting and prostrations, for example, help us to pray. I think it may be the same with how we dress. It does matter. If you wear pajamas to Walmart, you're going to have one kind of attitude. And if you wear a sexy dress, you will have another still. So I think that the first steps towards modesty in our dress would be to do away with the sex-based clothes. Clothes that are meant to make you feel more sexy are just not modest. And I think we all know that, whether it's very sheer clothing, clothing with a low collar, or with a high hemline. These are quite easy to see. But I don't think we should reduce it down to a certain length of your hemline or a certain neckline. I think modesty in dress is more about embracing who you are in Christ. It tends towards simplicity, neatness and cleanness, and appropriateness for the situation. One example might be if you're going to church, it would be appropriate to wear something longer, something even more modest to show respect in church and towards God. But maybe you're going to the lake or the beach, and there it might be more appropriate to wear something that still covers as much as possible, but allows you to do the activities you're trying to engage in with your family. It would be appropriate to wear a modest swimsuit while you're at the lake, but it would be immodest to wear that same suit to Walmart, right? And so appropriateness to the situation matters. But I think we strive to not stand out, but to have our dress be a reflection of what we value. We value as Christians simplicity, modesty, simpleness, cleanness, and even beauty, I'd say. I think it is okay for a woman to try to dress beautifully in that context. When I started wearing dresses and skirts every day, I noticed that not only did other people treat me differently, but I saw myself differently. I started to think more deeply about what my clothes were saying about me. And when I was out in public, I found that men began opening doors for me, or saying hello or ma'am more often. In turn, I smiled more, I said thank you more, and I treated the men I encountered with more respect. Honestly, I can't fully explain why this is the case, but I've heard that other women have had similar experiences. And I know that there are women out there who feel uncomfortable in skirts and dresses. And if this is the case for you, I really do sympathize. Sometimes I think we build this image of ourselves that this is something we do and that is something we don't do. And I would just encourage you to try a little experiment and try dressing in a more modest, feminine, and beautiful way and see how it feels. Spend a week doing that, and you might find that it's more comfortable than you had anticipated. But there's no judging, no matter where you are in your modesty journey. This is incredibly personal to each person. And again, I want to reiterate that it's not about a certain hemline, but it's about what we are trying to convey with our clothes, what we want the world to notice about us. And so since it's, incredibly personal, I think each of us need that space to work through it without judgment. And so we can also practice modesty in our speech. We've touched on this a little bit already, in making sure that we're showing respect to other people, that we're listening, that we're not gossiping. All of these are actually a form of modesty in the way we speak to each other. I would say also maybe being excessively boisterous or kind of showing any of the excesses of emotion. It doesn't mean that we have to be robots, of course, but I think that maybe if we overshare with people our inner life, that could be a form of immodesty, right? It's one thing to share it with a friend, but we don't need to tell every person we meet all about, what's going on deep inside of us. And lastly, I'd say there's a modesty in ambition, kind of related to definitely the career path versus the home path, but to know that our family loves us, that your children really don't care if you're famous or not. They don't care if you're admired by others or not. They love you for who you are. And the same goes for your husband and your extended family. And I think taking some joy in that modest, though deep and abiding love from other people, and not having this ambition to want the whole world to love us, right, in a very shallow way. I think that kind of modesty in the ambitions of our life is really important as well. To be content and happy with the small and joyful life that we have at home. Okay, and lastly, as with all things, we should do everything with prayer. If we're trying to move towards a more traditional lifestyle, ask God to help you. Ask Him to send you older women who can help you see what it means to be a pious and godly woman. Just the act of praying itself will help with laying aside all of those modern ideas and the modern habits that we've all picked up. And finally, just an encouragement to let you know that I think all the women now are going through this. We all struggle with the different levels of feminism that we've internalized, and we're all struggling to cast it off in one way or another. And it takes time, but there's a lot of joy in embracing the traditional role of a woman because we begin to not fight against what God has created us to be, which is lovers of our children and our husbands and caretakers of our homes. And there's no shame in that. It's actually a very glorious thing that God has made us for. And we have to undo the programming of the modern world and really embrace that this is a beautiful life and that you can find so much joy and fulfillment in this. that this is actually what God created women to do, to have children, to care for their homes. This is a beautiful thing. And so I pray that our good God, through the prayers of His Holy Mother, our Panagia, help you on this very noble path. God bless you all.